Welcome, everyone. My name is June Hoydel. I'm with the Zimmerman Reed Law Firm. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. We know this is a challenging time for many of you. Our hearts go out to you, and our goal tonight is to make sure that we serve as a resource and give you some helpful information. With me tonight is Jessica Hayes from the Murray Law Firm. We're working together in providing legal services to wildfire victims, and you will hear more from her in a little bit. Our featured speaker, Jack Weaver, with the Welty, Weaver, and Curry Law Firm, is also with us tonight. Jessica will introduce Jack in a second, but before we do that, I just want to cover some standard items. This webinar is being recorded to comply with professional standards. This webinar is an attorney advertisement, and unless you signed a retainer with us already, this webinar does not establish an attorney-client relationship. If you are interested in retaining us, we will provide you with information later on how to contact us. And we'll be providing some generalized advice tonight on how to navigate your insurance claim, but we encourage you to do your own research, and you should feel free to consult other legal counsel. And we've scheduled this webinar for a half hour, so we'll make sure to end on time, but we will leave time at the end for a question and answer portion. With that, I will hand it off to Jessica, who will introduce our featured speaker.
Good evening. As mentioned, my name is Jessica Hayes. I'm with the Murray Law Firm, and it's my pleasure to introduce Jack Weaver. We've been working with Jack for many years now. He is the managing partner at Welty, Weaver, and Curry, and they have very well versed in insurance litigation and insurance claims that unfortunately started for them about 10 years ago when the Tubbs fire hit the heart of their community. And they started to have their clients, their family, and their friends reach out to them for help in their insurance claims. And they worked everybody through that process and helped them to handle the various issues that come up in the insurance disputes and maximize their recovery. So we're very much happy to have him here with us to answer any questions you might have about the insurance claim process and walk you through some of the core issues there. Thanks, Jack.
Yep. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to jump right into it because I knew we have limited time and there's a lot to cover. So tonight I'm going to be talking primarily about what I'm going to call first-party claims, meaning claims get with your insurance company. You've suffered a loss in the Palisades or the Altadena or any other fire, and as a result, your home is either completely burned down or maybe it's still standing, but it was heavily damaged with smoke or soot or ash or other contaminants. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover both areas, the total burn downs and then the partial losses and the way that we would approach them as a law firm for our clients. And hopefully that will give you some general tips and direction on where you should go. And if you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer those. So I'm going to move quickly because I know I don't have a lot of time. Let's start with the very first thing you should do is if you've suffered a loss or you think you may have suffered a loss, then you need to tender a claim to your insurer, and they're going to assign you a claim number, and they're going to assign you an adjuster. And that adjuster, you're going to get probably 2 or 3 different adjusters to your claim. You're going to get what's called a desk adjuster. That's the person who makes the decisions about your claim, along with management at the insurance company. And then you're going to get a field adjuster. That's the person that's going to come out and view your home, whether it's rubble or whether it's still standing, to determine the extent of the damage. You're going to get a personal property adjuster. That's somebody that's going to tell you about, you're going to look at your personal property and try and assist in figuring out what can be cleaned versus what was totally destroyed or anything in the mill. And then those are the adjusters you will primarily have. You may also have what's called an ALE adjuster, an additional living expense adjuster. So you'll get your claim filed. You're going to then get a claim number and an adjuster. And then the process really is, it depends on was your home a total burn down or was it a partial loss. I'm going to start with the total burn downs. You have a total burn down. The first thing that you're going to probably be thinking about right now is debris removal, because you've got a deadline coming up of March 31st to either opt in or opt out of the Army Corps. People frequently want to ask, should I go private? Should I go with the Army Corps? What's the best move? And the answer is it depends. It depends on your coverage. Most of you have coverage for debris removal in your policies. If you get your declarations page out, that's the front page of your policy. It has all these different coverages. And it says things like dwelling A. And then if you're with State Farm, it'll say something like Home Option Plus. USAA calls it extended replacement cost. There's many different names for this, but essentially you've got your dwelling A coverage. That covers your house. That's the structure that covers your house. Then you've got your extended replacement cost. It'll frequently say something like 125% of dwelling A. So what that means is if you have $1 million in coverage for your A limit, and you can prove to the insurance company that it will cost more than $1 million to rebuild your home, the home that you had, not the one that you're rebuilding, but they only care about what you had. They're not insuring what you build. So you need to show the exact cost of what it would take to rebuild your exact home that you had, whether you're going to rebuild it or not, to prove to them that it's going to be more than the limit of the A limit, and then you'll have this extended replacement cost kicker. Many of you will. And what that is that's another 25%. It can be 50%. It can be 100%. It's all specific by the policy that says it. Let's pretend it's 25%. Well, and that's in my hypothetical, you would have an extra $250,000 to go after. So you would need to show the adjuster that a ready, willing, and able contractor is going to charge you at more than $1.25 million in my hypothetical example to rebuild your home. You have other coverages in your policy. Those things say things like other structures. Other structures are things like driveways, pools, retaining walls, but it's anything that is not physically attached to your house, but is a structure. People think generally of detached garages, studios, that certainly counts, but it's also, like I said, walls, fences, retaining walls, pools, irrigation systems, all of that counts. So that's a separate coverage you have with a separate limit. However, if you're able to use your extended replacement cost, all your subsequent limits will also generally rise in the same proportion. So you actually can find extra money there by carefully reading your policy and making sure that you are maxing out all these limits, because they're all like separate buckets and each one covers a different thing. And the insurance company is more than happy to pour everything into bucket A and then say, oh, you're over limits. You're over limits by 300,000. Golly gee, sorry. Well, many of those things that are in bucket A could probably also be in your other structures, or they may be called building code, ordinance, or law. That's a fancy way of saying there are building codes that everyone has to follow. And most of you, if not all of you, will have coverage that says something like ordinance or law. That's a separate bucket that you can tap into, that if you have to spend money to bring the house up to current building codes, which every one of you would, because some of your homes would have been built in 1941. Some of them would be built, even if it was built in 2020, building codes change every 3 years. So there's going to be additional codes in place that will be enforced on the rebuild, even if you're not rebuilding. This is still coverage that you can go after, and I'm going to get to that. But this is separate coverage to comply with the building codes. So you want to make sure that you're looking at each of your buckets of coverage and you're ensuring that you're hitting the limit in each of them. That includes personal property. Insurance companies are giving you right now, some are doing 75% no list, some of them are doing 80%, some of them are doing 50%. They all do different things. Under the policy, what they're saying is most of them will give you a percentage of that amount without you ever having to turn in a list and just saying, this is what I had. I believe I had more than this amount of money, and they'll give it to you. To get the rest of it, you're going to have to itemize all the items in your house and come up with replacement cost values that you show them, apply depreciation, and then show that that number is still higher than the limit of the personal property. And I know I'm going fast. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but the bottom line, the takeaway here is you have different buckets of coverage, and you'll have different adjusters for each. And you'll have coverage for things like trees, plants, and shrubs. That's another coverage that you likely have. That's oftentimes 5% of your dwelling A limit. You need to read your policy to see if that says that. And it is important to read your policy because your policy has things that are exclusions too. They'll say things like, if you do X, Y, or Z, then you void this part of the coverage or that. So it is an important thing to read and understand as you're working through the process with your adjuster to ensure that you're maximizing these limits. You've probably all heard the old adage, real estate is location, location, location. In what we do with this insurance work, it's documentation, documentation, documentation. Okay. You need to document everything. You need to be able to show them. You want to save receipts for the items that you've purchased. You want to, if you have to go rent a new house because your house is unlivable or it's burned down, That's an additional living expense. You're going to have a separate code bucket for that with a separate amount of money that's specified for that. So again, this is kind of like a game of filling up the buckets to make sure that you're putting things in the appropriate places and that you're putting it all in what I'm going to call insurance speak, so that the adjuster can understand and will recognize that your loss actually exceeds those limits. So that is like a very truncated version of what we do with the claims that we work with. But essentially, that's how you approach it. You want to figure out if you have debris removal coverage. Most of you will. It's generally 5% of your A limit. So if you had $1 million, you have $50,000 worth of coverage. So the first thing you want to do is go get a bid from a debris removal contractor and find out if it's going to be more or less than the amount of coverage you have. If it's less and it's within the limit, then going private probably makes a lot of sense because you'll have a little more control over the process, and you can, and the insurance company will approve the bid, and then the debris removal contractor can move forward. If you find that those bids are higher than the amount of coverage you have, well, then you want to opt into the Army Corps, because what they will do is they will come in. You will not have control over the timing, and you will not have control over what they do, but they will come in and clear the lot. And once they clear the lot, they will probably in 3 to 4 years bill your insurance company. And if there's any money available, they will get that money if there's any remaining at that point in time. Typically, if you've done a good job, there won't be any money remaining, and the Army Corps just ends up doing it for free. So that's my advice on debris removal. I would check your coverage. I would figure out how much you have in private debris removal coverage, and then I would either opt in or opt out by the 31st, depending on if I had enough coverage to go private. Generally, if I have the coverage to go private, I go with a private contractor. But the Army Corps is just fine as well. They will do a fine job. You'll just have less control. So you'll do your debris removal. You're going to work with your adjusters. You're going to read your policy. You're going to try and make sure you understand that if there's any exclusions or things that you need to, worry about and try and avoid. Generally, exclusions are not going to apply if your house burned down. They're going to there's really nothing there to worry about. I don't want to scare everyone. At the same time, it's important to read and understand your policy. You should also be looking at your policy because you'll have what's called endorsements. These are things at the end of your policy that can add coverage or subtract coverage from your policy. They're very important. They're specific to you and your policy that you purchased. So you want to read those because you may find, oh, I had extra 10% coverage here for this circumstance and that applies, or oh, I had this or that, and it's found money. It's money that you paid for through your premium and that they owe you. I don't think insurance companies are bad, but I will say they are not incentivized to give you more. They didn't get big shiny buildings by overpaying claims. So they're going to look for the cheapest possible way to rebuild your home to the way that it was. And if that number, even in their eyes, is at your limits, then they're going to pay you your limits. One thing to know about that: the extended replacement costs that I covered earlier, as well as the building code, you will get paid those things, but only when you incur it. So what that means is, if in my previous example, if you had $1 million of coverage in dwelling A, and then you have $250,000 more, and you prove to them that's 1.25, they're going to send you that $1 million first. They're going to hold on to that 250 until you either sign a new contract with a contractor to rebuild your home, or you replace with something else that costs at least 1.25 million. So that's important. You want to look at all of your coverages, not counting personal property, and add them together. So if I had $1 million in coverage A, 250 in extended replacement cost, 100,000 in other structures, and let's say 200,000 in code, then I'm going to have roughly $1.55 million in total coverage. I'd want to know that number so that if I worked with my adjuster and we adjusted the loss and we figured out that it was going to be at least 1.5 million or more, then when I go out and I get into escrow for a new house that's at least 1.55 million, they're going to cut a check to escrow for that building code money and that extended replacement cost money because it's now been incurred. So that's the general. I know I've gone really quickly, but that's the general with total burn downs that you need to be thinking about. And I will answer specific questions. I can see some of them popping up. I'll do that at the end. Partial losses. Your house is still standing, but it's in a wasteland of debris and you don't know what to do. And that is totally understandable. It's a different process, but also somewhat the same. Your dwelling A coverage still covers your home for all the repairs that need to be done to it. What you do if you have a partial loss is you need to find a hygienist, okay? There are certified hygienists that can go through your home and they will test your home in different areas. And they will come up with a protocol that they say, this is what you need to do. I'm a PhD in this, and this is what you need to do to clean your home. It can be, you'll need to likely have your insulation removed because in the summers it will off gas and smoke has settled into it and ash. And in the summers it will heat up, rise up and go into your HVAC again. So all the insulation will likely need to come out. Your carpets need to be replaced. Soft goods need to be either cleaned or replaced. Walls need to be scrubbed. Every item in the house has to be packed out by a vendor, itemized, taken to the appropriate sub cleaner, and then brought back to the home and put away. So you get a hygienist to, and there are tons of them, you can look them up, to come in and inspect the home and give you a protocol. And then there are smoke remediation companies you can contact, Serve Pros and Anderson Group and others, that will come through and they will look at that hygienist report. And many of them have hygienists they work with already, and they will give you an estimate for what all that work needs to be done, saying, okay, we have to take out your can lights and clean them. We have to replace your insulation. We have to do X, Y, and Z. This will total this much money. You take that hygienist report and that bid from the smoke remediation company and you give it to your adjuster and you say, this is what needs to be done to clean my house. With this disaster, you're going to want to talk to them as well about, well, hold on, my home is sitting in the middle of a wasteland. I have many clients that say this to me. I'm not, even if they cleaned it, what happens when my neighbors do debris removal and knock all the dust into the air and it recontaminates? It's a fair question, and it's a unique problem to this fire that has not been faced in previous fires as extensively. Generally, what I'm hearing insurance companies say is that they want to wait until debris removal is at least largely finished, and then you can start the cleaning process. So in that circumstance, you will want to talk to your adjuster, figure out when and how you're going to, well, first figure out the scope of your loss and what it's going to cost to fix it, get agreement on that, and then work with them on when the work will be completed. And then that work will be completed, everything will be packed out, your house will be cleaned, it gets retested, it's proven to be safe, everything comes back in, and you move back in. In the meantime, your additional living expense money is covering your rental house and where you're living and extra expenses you have as a result of the fire. Those can be things like eating out until you have a kitchen. If you had to buy temporary clothes because you left with the clothes on your back, that can count. Things like that. So you want to save your receipts. So I've gone very, very quickly, and I know I've gone over my time a little bit, but those are the general parameters. That's how we approach when we adjust claims for our clients. That's what we do. We run the whole process, and we basically, those are the items we're hitting. We're working with vendors to make sure that we hit all these numbers and that we maximize the insurance claims, because you paid for this policy and you deserve to get every penny of it. And it's very hard to know if you're getting a good deal if you've never had your house burned down before. So that's the general advice. I'm happy to answer specifics, or if anyone wants to jump in with something. I saw there was a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, so there's a question in the chat. Thank you, Jack.
Yep.
There's a question in the chat. Is it necessary to hire a public adjuster when navigating such a complex claim?
It's not necessary. I mean, okay, so full disclosure, my law firm has public adjusters that work with it. So I'm probably biased because I'm both an attorney and I have public adjusters that work for me, and we do that exact work. That's what we do. Is it necessary? No, you can do this yourself. I always tell clients I can't prove a negative, right? I can't prove how much you would get on your own versus how much you will get with a public adjuster. Not all public adjusters are bad. There's many that are very, very good and very, very helpful. And they know all the stuff that I'm telling you and how to maximize claims. They know the rules. They know the insurance codes. They know what the insurance companies have to do and what they don't have to do. And they can generally help you, because what you're really trying to do is set your claim up for success with the adjuster by working with him. And that's what the public adjuster does, to say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about Title 24? Have you thought about, the fact that fire sprinklers are going to have to be put in the new home? And work with them to help push that bid up to beyond limits. Because once the insurance company says, okay, yeah, we agree you're at limits, at least now the money is going to be available to you. It's just and then all you have to do is go execute on it. So public adjusters can be very helpful. Absolutely. But are they necessary? No, they're not required. You can absolutely do this on your own. It is a daunting process, and it is a full-time job.
And I think we have time for a couple more questions. How much detail do we need to include in the home inventory? Do we need to list every single item, or general categories acceptable?
Great question. It depends on the insurance company. The thing is, they're very happy to do it by category because they're going to insert their own values for your items, and that's obviously to their advantage. So, in general, most of them are saying you don't have to do it by item, you can do it by category, but then you're going to have to assign a value to the total items that are in that category, and then they're going to kind of vet that with you. So that can be a quicker way if your insurance company allows you to go by category. Certainly do that, but you want to be sure that you're really thinking of all the items in that category and then coming up with a number, a replacement cost number that is accurate, because they're going to depreciate that number because every item that you owned was used, and therefore has been, some items depreciate, some items don't. Antiques don't depreciate, collectibles don't depreciate, but your sofa does. And so if you bought it for $1,000 5 years ago, they're going to say it's worth 500 today. So those are the things that you need to be keeping in mind when you're doing your itemized list. Other insurance companies are requiring you to do it by item, and it depends on the insurance company. So, but that's the only way that you're going to get the full value of your personal property limit at this point in time.
We have time for one more question. What if the adjuster objects to expensive tasks? How do I handle that? Tasks such as replacing insulation.
Well, that's why you want to get a hygienist, right? Because if your hygienist protocol says that has to happen, that's much harder for them to argue against versus you just saying it needs to happen because you think it's important. That's the whole purpose of the hygienist. Hygienists generally cost a couple $1,000s to have them come and do this testing. However, most of you will have what's called claim investigation expense coverage. Many insurance companies will cover that cost of that hygienist to have that work done to figure out if it's actually covered, to figure out what needs to be done. So the answer to that is if you've got a difficult adjuster, you hire that hygienist yourself, you have the protocol done, you give it to them, you say, here's the protocol that I got from this hygienist, and here's the bill for the hygienist that I'd like you to pay, and now I want to follow this protocol to clean my house. That's how you deal with that.
Well, thank you, Jack. Just to be mindful of time, because we said we'd try to get people out of here in 30 minutes. Everybody will be receiving an email after this with information on how to reach us if you'd like to talk further with us. Again, we are representing wildfire victims. And then with that, I will hand it over to Jessica to close us out.
Sure. Thanks everybody who joined us tonight. We know that there's a lot going on, and we appreciate you taking your time and being here. Here at Zimmerman Reed, Welty Weaver and Curry, and the Murray Law Firm, we know that we've covered things in broad strokes tonight, and that you all have individual claims and we'd like to have the opportunity to talk with you more about that and learn the specific details of those claims, and get some feedback from you about how we could potentially help you with your recovery and explore the different options to see that you can maximize that recovery, whether it be through insurance claims or possible third-party claims. So please feel free to reach out to us, and if you have any additional questions, and we'll be reaching out to you again to just learn more about you and what your needs are going forward, and to be of assistance in this wildfire process. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.